webinar series. We're very happy that you're able to join us today, which is a continuation in a series of Global New York Export Assistance webinars. My name is Lennox Ruiz, Vice President for Global New York. Each webinar in the series will begin with a brief overview of Global New York's programs and services and features one or more of our foreign office representatives. Each program will finish with a Q&A period. On behalf of our Global New York team, I thank each and every one of you for being here with us today. We are pleased to be able to welcome those of you who have been with us before, as well as those who are new to the Global New York connection and relationship. Today's webinar will focus on export opportunities for healthcare and medical devices in Brazil and South Africa. And by extension of today's spotlight discussion, we particularly want to speak to you about your interest, particularly, and we'd like to help you grow your company in both of these international markets. I'm pleased to acknowledge my fellow Global New York professionals today, both representing here in New York City, our headquarters, and around the regions. Particular thanks to Maggie Cunningham and Ms. Cherry Marge, who have organized our session today, as well as my co-presenters, Ms. Claudia Tomaselli, the Director of the Brazil office, and Mr. Richard Zilber, Director of the South Africa office. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone will be muted during the presentation, except for the speaker. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted on the Global New York website for your access after the session via internet link. We would like very much to hear from you during the session. If you have a question for our speakers or for our Global New York program staff or regional representatives, please feel free to send it through the chat tab at the bottom of your screen. We will be answering your questions at the end of this presentation. If we don't get to your questions during the webinar, we will be sure to follow up afterwards. Furthermore, we would very much appreciate if you would like to encourage others to use our services and to share the webinar presentation with them as well. As indicated in the agenda on the screen, I will begin with a brief introduction about Global New York programs, which will answer many of your questions as to how you can help your businesses to grow internationally by accessing the available New York State resources to help achieve your objectives. Immediately after my brief presentation will be followed by our presenters, Claudia Tomaselli and Richard Zilber. Both Claudia and Richard together bring a wealth of knowledge and on-the-ground hands-on experience in helping companies in Brazil and South Africa. I promise that will be very interesting. So let's get started. Who are we and what do we do for the state of New York? Global New York mission is to help promote competitiveness and to help New York State small businesses to grow their products and services globally. Under the Global New York banner, we also assist in attracting foreign direct investment to New York State. Next slide, please. Global New York is part of Empire State Development, the state's main economic development agency, whose mandate, of course, is to help spur economic development and business creation and expansion within the state of New York. We're an integral part of Empire State Development, who operates by having 10 regions across New York State. The map on your screen displays the 10 economic development regions of the state. And in each of those regions, the agency has what we refer to as regional offices that are staffed with economic development professionals who on a daily basis work to assist the local communities in getting economic development and business activities as spurred throughout the state. Next slide, please. Our team currently, as seen on the screen, we're a small team, but quite lean and mean, as we say, and willing to work with you. A team of 11 professionals, Carrie Baker-Scott, Richard Ball, Catherine Bamberger, Maggie Cunningham, our marketing director as well, who is currently here operating the screen, Cherry Marge, our department coordinator, Lauren Merkel, who handles FDI on behalf of the Global New York and the state of New York and part of the Strategic Business Division, Lauren Quilly, and Antonio Rodriguez, who manages the STEP program, Omar Sanders, Brian Tubner, who also manages the Global New York grant programs. Next slide, please. Mentioned earlier, the state has 10 regions, and in each of those regions, you can see that you're covered in terms of working with Global New York staff and professionals. And so this slide was intended to show you that a phone call away, and we're available here to work with you to assist in your businesses accessing the Global New York services and programs. Next slide, please. So just a quick a bit of facts about exporting. Even with a 330 million plus residents and population in the United States, we're still only 4% of the world's population. It means that over 95% of the world's population resides outside the United States. And with that, over 70% of the world's purchasing power. Trade represents over 60% of the world's trillion-dollar economy. And we do know that exporting companies grow on average 22% faster with sales and job creation than companies that do not export. And even with that, there's only a tiny percentage of US companies do export. Next slide, please. A little bit of exporting opportunities for New York. We know there are about 38,000 New York State companies that are eligible as potential medium-sized and small businesses. And just in 2019, where we're just comparing stats, New York State had over $75 billion of merchandise exports throughout the globe. Next slide, please. A little bit of facts again. New York State, if you look at our exporting products, this highlights the diversity of our state, ranging anywhere from precious stones and metals all the way to pharmaceuticals, electrical machinery, and the like. So you can see we have quite a diverse economy within New York State. Next slide, please. So again, looking out towards the world in terms of exports and imports to New York State, we're just highlighting here the top 10 imports and exporting countries. This has helped in instructing where we consider locating our offices across the globe, taking into account as well potential growth markets for New York State. Next slide, please. We have located our presence across the globe in these areas and markets, starting in the East, China, India, Israel, UK, Europe, Canada, Mexico, South Africa, and certainly not in any way least South America, as represented here by having representation in Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Colombia, and Peru. And in a short while, you'll be hearing from our director in Brazil office. Next slide, please. So what do we have to offer you? We've shown you why you should consider exporting. Here are the programs that we have to offer you and services. And I will briefly touch on each of these just to give you a flavor as to what the opportunities here are available for you. And keep in mind, you don't have to recall all this information. Next slide, please. But we're here to assist you, and I'll just touch on each of these programs. The first is our Export Marketing Assistance Service, also known as EMAS. We're government, so we always resort to having an acronym for our programs and services. Here, your company can work directly with our representatives in the various markets to identify sales agents and distributors. We also will provide you through that representation and engagement with reports on market intelligence and opportunities to engage with these manufacturers, reps, and distributors. And the good thing about this is, which you really appreciate, highlighted here, this is of no cost to you. So it comes at the right price. Next slide, please. So Export Marketing as Service, here's what we ask of you, that we generally have criteria that ask that you, a New York State company, at least 1 year in business, 500 employees or less, which qualifies you as a small business, and at least 51% of your product content is in New York State. Easy access, it's a fillable web-based application, and a click away, and these applications will it will be shown to you fillable through a PDF and submitted through the Global New York website, and we'll be there to assist you. Next slide, please. So the next program is the State Trade Expansion Program, also known as STEP. And this is a collaboration between New York State, Global New York, and the Small Business Administration. We have been quite fortunate in being able to collaborate with the Small Business Administration to assist New York State companies in increasing the number of New York State companies that are actually exporting, increase the value of the export for their businesses. Next slide, please. So what do we do under this program? We're quite fortunate that we're able to provide grants of up to $13,000 per company per year to begin exporting in global markets. On the STEP program, we have been, again, quite fortunate to be able to provide to you the funding that we have received through the SBA, ranging from $700,000 under the STEP 7 and STEP 8 programs. And in 2020, we also received an additional $250,000 under the STEP 9 program. The grant is awarded in the form of a reimbursement. Yes, you got to have some skin in the game, and we cover up to 70% of the cost. Next slide, please. So under the State Trade Expansion Program, you can see the range of uses of funds for your company, ranging anywhere from participating in the foreign trade missions that we undertake through Global New York, financial assistance in the terms of travel, and in today's world, where we are embarking on a lot on virtual services, we can provide up to $6,000 in services. We also support the U.S. Commercial Services subscription service programs, which work very well for us in collaboration and support for their export assistance throughout the world and using their offices as well. We also can assist in your attending export training workshops, domestic trade shows, and website design, foreign language translation, and any marketing campaign. So you can see it's a wide range here of opportunities, and an exciting one for companies that do engage under this program. Next slide, please. So eligibility under this program, again, it's really targeted for manufacturing, assembly, or distributors of products and services. We ask that you are indeed a small business ongoing concern, as it's usually said, meaning that you've got to be a small business operating viably within the United States. Under this program, we only require that you have 51% of US content. And again, there's a fillable PDF application available online. And these applications, for those who have engaged in the past, will tell you that these are readily available and easily fillable, and then we get back to you within a few days. Next slide, please. Upcoming opportunities, you'll see over the last few years, we have embarked on several trade missions and supported many of those over the last few years, including just last month, we supported the Digital Hanover Messe Trade Show, where we have over 13 New York State companies participated. And upcoming later this month is a Virtual India Trade Mission, also a multi-sector trade mission to Mexico in next month, June, July time period, and later in September, a multi-sector trade mission to Canada. And all this information is available on the web as well. Next slide, please. So last but certainly not least is our Global New York Grant Fund, and that program is intended to help New York State small businesses to export again. And next slide, please. And under the Global New York Grant Program, we can provide assistance for for-profit companies ranging from $10,000 to $25,000 with a matching of 50% cash, 51% New York State content again is expected of you, and of course, asking that you're at least 1 year in business. For not-for-profit companies, grants ranging from $10,000 to $50,000 and with a 40% cash match. Next slide, please. And again, here, eligible activities, market customization, trade shows, trade mission, product adaptation, product certification for not-for-profit businesses, and for-profit businesses. We can support your efforts in helping your memberships through trade events and trade education as well. Next slide, please. And so that concludes my end of the presentation on behalf of Global New York. And without further ado, we'd like to turn it over to our colleague, Ms. Tomaselli, to cover the Brazil market, and immediately to be followed by Richard Zerber, who will cover the Southern Africa market. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, today I will be briefly covering the topics that were listed, that are listed there. And before jumping into the healthcare sector per se, I thought it would make sense to share with you some very brief information on Brazil. We have seen throughout the years that not everyone is aware of how different Brazil is within the South American region. And this misconception is one of the reasons why some foreign companies are not successful in Brazil. This is why we are going to touch this. As you may all know, the differences start with our cultural heritage and heritages and language. Brazil is the only Portuguese colony in the Americas and therefore the only Portuguese-speaking country in South America. So let's take a look at the other factors. Next, please, Van. With continental dimensions, Brazil borders almost every South American country with the exception of Chile and Ecuador, as you can see on the right side of the slide. Our population is almost 6 times bigger than Canada's, and Brazil's middle class currently represents more than half of its total population. To give you an idea, this is approximately the equivalent to the total population of Argentina, Chile, and Colombia combined, just for the middle class. Brazil has a developing mixed economy that in 2020 was the 12th largest in the world by nominal GDP and 8th largest by purchasing power parity. The country has an estimated 21.8 trillion worth of natural resources, and this abundance in natural resources, together with the growing middle class and the demand for infrastructure projects, are factors that will continue to drive our economic growth. And this will not change in the near future, despite the pandemic or all the political turmoil that you might have been seeing on the news. The current exchange rate here does not look very favorable for US exports, but we thought it would be nice to leave it there for you to understand that understand better the Brazilian market, right? You will learn that, you will see that with a weak Brazilian currency, the weak Brazilian currency boosts our exports, which will boost the need for investment in productivity and in the modernization of our local industry. And this will all revolve in exports opportunities for US and New York companies. And the good news is that Brazil has been enjoying a trade surplus for some consecutive years. So those are the main things that differentiate us from our other neighbors. Let's take a quick look now at where we stand in terms of global markets. Next, please, Vanya. Like the US, we have a highly diversified and dynamic market. Brazil is the largest country and economy in Latin America, as you know, and we are second only to the US in the Western Hemisphere. We have a huge service sector, a well-developed and diversified industrial sector too, in addition to being home to one of the largest agriculture and mining markets in the world. Brazil is also one of the largest markets for helicopters, executive aircrafts, cosmetics and healthcare products, PCs, medical devices, as you can see here that we are the fifth largest in the world, mobile phones, automotives, TVs, and I could go on and on here. I think the main message here is, again, our abundant natural resources will continue to offer significant potential in many ways, not only for renewable energy and all that, but also, as we saw, it is one of the drives of our economic growth, and this is not going to change. Let's take a look in the healthcare sector now. Vanya, next, please. Okay, so Brazil is Latin America's largest healthcare market. Valued at 236 billion in 2019, we ranked as the 8th largest healthcare market in the world. This figure is forecasted to rise by almost 70% by the end of this decade. There are currently in Brazil over 6,500 hospitals, 70% of them are private, and there are approximately 500,000 hospital beds in the country. And as you can see on the slide, the number of professionals active in the industry are also very impressive, but the pandemic showed that they are not sufficient. Healthcare spendings as a percentage of the GDP reached 13% in 2019, accounting for 32.5% of Brazil's total healthcare expenditure. Among the main characteristics of the Brazilian healthcare market is our system of free and universal public healthcare, which is called known locally as SUS. Under this system, the taxes paid by Brazilians cover all types of consultations and treatments offered without charging any additional users. As a matter of fact, it is not only for Brazilians, it's for any resident living in Brazil, even foreign. Many people, many foreigners come here in Brazil for the AIDS treatment, for the HIV treatment, because it's free of charge. In addition to medical diagnostic and treatments, the public system provides free medication for some chronic diseases and also promotes the national vaccination programs. While underfunded, the public health system provides robust coverage across the country, but it is perceived as too time consuming. And of course, with continental dimensions, it lacks quality equipment and doctors in some regions of the country. Due to this, Brazilians that can afford opt for private healthcare services. Driven by the growth of the middle class, the number of people using some kind of private healthcare service has actually increased from 30 million in 2004 to 50 million in 2014. This is an approximate 60% increase. This growth has helped fuel the boom of the sector. And as we just saw, it is expected to continue growing the next years. In 2019, almost 60 million Brazilians, or 1/3 of the total population, had a healthcare plan, either medical or dental. With the private sector taking a greater role, estimates are that over the next 10 years, the public funding will be reduced to around 29% of the total healthcare spending. And this trend is also expected to improve both systems, right, and creating opportunities for healthcare services, products, and solutions suppliers. Next, please. So where the opportunities are? Well, even before the COVID, the Brazilian market was seeing increasing dynamism in the area of healthcare solutions. Investments in the sector until 2025 were estimated at $8 billion. And this should help speed up efforts to implement and broaden the use of Internet of Things, big data, artificial intelligence. But best prospects for New York companies are currently in digital solutions for healthcare consultation, diagnostics, and treatment. Also, there are opportunities for those providing solutions that will boost the informatization and integration of the public and private healthcare facilities throughout the national territory. It's worth highlighting here that the Brazil's Ministry of Health is working to modernize the SUS, and the Connect SUS program is a good example of that. Through this program, the government is making monthly payments of approximately $8 million in each municipality that wants to computerize their health services. The goal of the program is that by 2023, healthcare professionals from public and private facilities will have access to information that will assist in the individual health follow-up of every Brazilian citizen at any place and any time. Private hospitals are also obviously constantly investing in technology, and several new hospitals are formalizing their modernization progress by obtaining international certificates. There are opportunities in other segments of the industries, of course, such as in hospital architecture, for instance, but as we will see in a few slides ahead, the telehealth is indeed the main trend pre and post COVID, and the good news is that there is a natural affinity in Brazil for US products, as most of our doctors, they go to the US for their post-graduation. So this should all revolve into great opportunities for New York companies. But here are some things to keep in mind. Opportunities in Brazil are for innovative solutions and high-tech products rather than supplies. This is one other big differentiation between Brazil and the other South American markets. And this is because the Brazilian healthcare market is price-driven. The number of local manufacturers of medical devices and startups are increasing. And of course, the domestic companies, they enjoy some advantage in terms of price. Also, it's very important to keep in mind that any company selling into the Brazilian healthcare market, this means domestic and foreign ones, they must comply with the local regulations of the Brazilian National Health Surveillance Agency, known locally as Anvisa, which is the FDA's counterpart in Brazil, but we will touch on that further down. Next, please, Vania. So Brazil is also the largest medical device market in Latin America. As we saw before, we are the 5th largest in the world. This market was estimated at 11 billion US dollars last year, and it's expected to continue to expand by around 10% throughout the next years. In this slide, we have listed some of the segments that offer great opportunities for New York companies. And again, these are the ones that set apart, but there are opportunities in other market niches, especially for innovative products and products that will help on the productivity of the segment. And again, keep in mind that the MDS sector is also regulated by Anvisa. And as we will see ahead, Anvisa also requires that some medical devices comply with the local standards. It is mandatory for some certain medical devices. But before we get to the regulation, let's take a quick look at the Brazilian imports data for the medical devices. Next, Vania, please. So imports of medical devices increased by almost 13% in 2020. This is equivalent, the $6.2 billion is equivalent to approximately 56% of the total market. 17%, you can see here at the left side of the slide, that 17% of those imports came from the US, ranking the US as the 2nd largest source of imported medical devices into Brazil after China. China has surpassed recently, but from China, the main imports are usually disposables, EPPs, and other hospital and medical materials. There are some equipment too, but as I said in the beginning of this presentation, there is an affinity in Brazil for US products, and the US products are perceived as high quality. As you can see below on the right side of this slide too, the US is also a main destination for Brazil exports of medical devices. So this means that Brazil is a large importer, but also an exporter of medical devices, right? And these Brazilian exporters are constantly looking at expanding their sales to other markets, which means that this sector also offers opportunities for exporters of industrial equipment and also for companies that are interested in a merge and acquisition or acquisition. And, talking about mergers and acquisitions, when we get back to our initial slide, we saw that the current exchange rate couldn't be better for that, right? Next, Vania, please. Here you can see the 3 drivers that will continue to change the Brazilian healthcare landscape over the coming years: the growing middle class and the increasing life expectancy, together with the determination of the government and also the private sector to improve the healthcare infrastructure. Those are factors that are not going to change in the near or long term. So this scenario is offers potential for U.S. products and services again. The government of Brazil is known for being the main buyer of healthcare products, but please keep in mind that foreign companies need to have a local presence in order to participate in public bids. So partnering with a local company is actually the best strategy to enter or expand your presence in Brazil. Uh, uh, Culturally speaking, Brazilians prefer to buy from companies that are just a call away. And the personal relationship in Brazil is very important. Not to mention that the local distributors are already very familiar with the Anvisa's requirements and other market nuances. And again, please keep in mind, the opportunities in Brazil are for high-tech and innovative product services or solutions. I know I'm being repetitive here, but I think one thing that you should know or should think of when wondering about your potential in Brazil is if you are selling to a more mature market, like for instance, Canada or Europe, you will most likely be successful in Brazil. Also, keep in mind that the public bids are price driven, and the domestic companies, as I said, enjoy a price competitive advantage. But as we will see further down, if a product cannot be sourced locally, if it is not manufactured locally, this product might be awarded with a tax exemption, which will help a lot in the competitive landscape. Next, please. So the effects of the COVID, let's see. As we have already seen, the impact of COVID-19 was great on the Brazilian economy. We shrunk by 4.1%, but this was actually better than initially forecasted. But today, Brazil still figures as one of the epicenters of the pandemic, and the biggest impact of that the virus caused in the sector was actually making clear its inefficiency in a way in terms of human resources and infrastructure. A recent study conducted by Bain and Company in Brazil dismembered the different impacts of COVID-19 in the healthcare sector. Here you can see how they have split it. According to this study, there are factors that will remain stable regardless the impacts of the pandemic, and they are related to the population profile and growth, as you can see in the upper left side of this slide. We have just seen that too, that these are also key drivers of the sector's growth. There are also the factors that were already trends before the pandemic and that ended up being accelerated by it. This is the case of the demand for data interoperability, the implementation of the telehealth and digital tool solutions, the increased search of our adoption of alternative care facilities, and also the growing focus by patients on integrated care and behavioral health. The COVID-19 forced regulators and health plans to remove barriers to telemedicine, including regulatory reviews. But as we can see, those factors will end up consolidated as new trends. And again, here's where the opportunities lie, right? Uh, Finally, there are factors that are still uncertain in the long term, like for instance, determining the level of government intervention and precising the dates for the return to face-to-face work, or the immunity programs, and the resumption of elective procedures or other face-to-face treatment. Next. So we already know that Anvisa regulates the sector and they are the equivalent to FDA in the US. Anvisa's regulation, though, for medical devices specifically, are based on the European Directive of Medical Devices. So product classification and regulations tend to be similar to those used in Europe, but they are not identical. Anyways, the first step in the Brazilian regulatory process is to determine the correct classification for your medical device. Brazil groups it into classes 1, 2, 3, and 4, according to the intrinsic risk factors that the devices may represent to patients, health professionals, or third party involved. An important observation regarding the product registration is that it has to be requested either by the local office of a foreign company or by its agent distributor before any import process takes place. So we usually recommend our clients to establish the partnership with a registry holder that does not have any commercial interest in the product per se, just to be on the safe side. But having a distributor registering your product is also very common, and you can guarantee by means of a contract that a possible transfer of registry, if needed, will be smooth. Another important thing to pay attention is that according to the Brazilian legislation, the production, manufacturing, imports, exports, or sales of any medical device can only be held in Brazil by an authorized company that is also registered with Anvisa. So it means we need to have the product registered at Anvisa, and the organization that is selling this product also registered at Anvisa. So New York companies that aim to sell health products in Brazil have either to appoint a distributor or agent, or who will host the registration with Anvisa, or open an office, a subsidiary in Brazil. The proof of registration with Anvisa will be required at the moment the goods arrive in Brazil. The customs service will clear the goods only after the verification of several licenses. Also, as I mentioned, as per Anvisa's requirements, some medical devices must be certified by the National Institute of Metrology, Standardization and Industrial Quality, locally known as INMETRO. The INMETRO certification is often mandatory for electromedical devices, subject to the IEC 60601, among others. The good news, though, is that in mid-December last year, INMETRO published a new ordinance for compliance of equipment under health surveillance regime. There are significant changes in the new ordinance, including some that should be good news to manufacturers, such as reduced audit time and removal of the test report age, the validate. The UL webpage provides more info on the new ordinances in English, and you can find the link here to the page, to the UL page. Another good news is that Brazil is now part of the MDSA program in conjunction with the US, Japan, Canada, and Australia. This means that we now accept the mutual recognized audit programs that are performed by third-party companies, which has also expedited the process of approval for new medical products in Brazil. This is kind of new. I think we have joined this program probably 2 or 3 years ago. So those can be considered little steps towards opening the local economy. They are small, but they are significant in a way. And the truth is that looking at modernizing Brazil's industry base, the local government is constantly acting in terms of reducing the tariffs and the non-tariff barriers. The next slide, Vanya, shows some actions, efforts that may benefit your company. The first one is the ex-tariff regime, ex-tarifário, a special regime that is in place for a long time and that awards a temporary tariff reduction for the import tax on products that cannot be sourced locally. This is a tool that the government has in order to modernize the local industry. So when it's needed, they take the import duty of a product. They do this also because of if there is any shortage or a high demand for a certain product, which was the case during the pandemic, right? We saw that. So since last year, the Brazilian government zeroed the import tax rate for approximately 700 products to fight the COVID. List of products exempted from import duty includes medical devices and hospital products. We have listed here some of the awarded product categories, but we will be happy to work with you on checking if your product is on this list. Anvisa has also taken action in terms of easing the import of essential goods, of the imports of essential goods to help fight the COVID. Next, Vanya. Other examples of the positive efforts of the Brazilian government are the recent changes on the bidding process, aiming at attracting foreign companies. In the US and Brazil trade scenario, two interesting agreements were signed in October last year and are also expected to boost and facilitate trade. The latest one is the Trade and Economic Cooperation Agreement signed among our countries on October 19th last year, aiming at supporting commerce, reducing costs and deadlines involved in the export and import operations. And this will also benefit the flow of investments. The second interesting cooperation was established between the US Embassy and the state of São Paulo, also in October. This is a memorandum of understanding that focus on partnerships in the areas of education, security, health, trade, and investments. And it aims to double the trade between the state of São Paulo and the US in the next 5 years. This is an important step to our trade relationship as well, because São Paulo is Brazil's largest state, and it is, in terms of population, we have almost the size of Argentina or Colombia. GDP-wise, São Paulo is responsible for 34% almost of the national GDP. So those efforts are also expected to attract US companies to do business in Brazil. And the good news is that through the New York Empire State Development Program, our company can help New York exporters that are interested in entering or expanding their presence in our market. Next, please. Well, we do not have the time to introduce ourselves better today, and you will have access to this presentation. And on this and the next slides, you will find a quick overview of who we are and what we do. And both Vanya and I will be more than happy to clarify any doubts or questions you may have regarding our company. So Vanya, let's move to the trade shows. Yes. And here we have listed the main trade shows held in Brazil for the medtech segment. There are others that cater to specific market niches within the industry, but Hospitalar is the main and largest one in Latin America. Again, Vanya and I will be happy to provide you with more information on these or any specific event you might be interested in. Next, Vanya, please. With that, I would like to wrap up by also saying that in November 2021, this year, we will be hosting a multi-state and multi-sector trade mission to Brazil that will also be visiting Colombia. We are still not 100% sure that this will indeed be a presential trade mission. It might end up being virtual due to the circumstances. But the important thing to keep in mind is the grant funding available in New York, as Lennox mentioned in the beginning of this webinar. I'm certain that the team can provide some more detailed information on this funding as well. Next, Vanya. Though here are some testimonials and thank you notes that we were asked to share too, and you will have the time to take a look into that when you get the presentation. And finally, this is our contact information. Vanya and I will very much appreciate working closely with you in Brazil. We can also be assessed, and I think it's preferably that you assess us through the New York office. And with that, I want to say thank you and for your time and pass it on to Richard or Lennox first. I don't know.
Yes, well, thank you very much, Claudia and Vanya. We really appreciate it. And at this point, we would like to turn it over to Richard Zerba, Director for the Southern Africa region. And Richard, you'll take it away from here. And just a quick note to everyone participating, we want to hear from you. So please enter your questions in the chat box. And if we don't get to all of your questions, we'll be sure to follow up with you. So without further ado, turn it over to Richard. Thank you, Richard.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Africa. So we've got a very big continent and a very big team right across Africa, working for New York companies, helping them to export into all kinds of different countries. Africa's got 55 different independent countries and a few that aren't even independent yet. So we actually have coverage right across the continent, and we're able to help African companies to assist them with buying New York products, but we want you to come into Africa and to look at the markets that exist out there. So where you see a red star are where we have team members right now, and hopefully soon we're going to have somebody in Ethiopia. So let's look forward to that. I just want to draw your attention to the fact that the population of Africa is becoming increasingly important to global commerce. And so as we look at the timeline, right now we're passing where Africa is, about 1.3 billion people. By 2050, it will have 2.5 billion. And by the end of this century, Africa will have over 40% of the world's population. If you look at Africa and India combined, by the end of this century, those two regions will have approximately 2/3 of the world's population. Now, that is going to be critically important for companies over the next, even the next 10 or 20 years to digest, because there's a lot of opportunity that comes with a growing demographic. The next thing that I want to show you is that the burden of disease across Africa is quite high, relatively speaking. So we have a relatively high percentage of dire and dread disease relative to the rest of the world, and you can see this is happening, but this is improving, and Africa is getting healthier and healthier all the time. The next thing is that non-communicable diseases have just exploded across the continent in the last few years. Over the last 20 years, a lot of the non-communicable diseases have gone up maybe 300-400%. And so there's a lot of opportunity to get in, not only in the communicable diseases, but into areas where there's hypertension and diabetes and asthma and all kinds of different areas where the importance of these kind of diagnostic work has gone on for decades already in America. And so there's a lot of tried and true technology out there, and Africa is starting now to really have a plague of all of these kinds of requirements. Now, where is Africa sitting right now demographically? And I saw that my colleague from Brazil also had a very interesting population graph. Africa has a very young population. The population of Africa is below 20 on average, 19.5. And there's countries like Nigeria where the population is somewhere below 18. And so if we look at the where Africa is, we can compare it to where China was around the year 1979, 1980, and that was the takeoff stage for China. This means that Africa has a very, not only a young population, but a very creative population. The middle class is growing very quickly. There's a lot of opportunity coming through because of this. Now, this makes Africa a very different market than what we saw with Brazil, because Brazil has a tapering effect coming in the future. Africa is not expecting to have that tapering in the population graphic that we see here. And we have the US below to one side, just to show an example of what a stable natural birth rate looks like. But I think that we actually won't be able to see what will be happening even in the near future, because actually the statistics even from last year showed that a lot of the world went against expectations. And so, but this is really where the driver is. Africa's got 1.3 billion people, and it's going to have soon the very largest common market by population, because China's going to have a declining population and Africa has an increasing population. And by geography, Africa is going to have the largest population and common market. So if we look at the general kinds of needs that go with different population requirements, we can see that Africa's increase in mother and child care and in the development of diseases is there's a huge need, a big growth in these sectors coming up. So watch for areas where young families are requiring better medical services and devices, where there's neonatal care, where there's motherhood care, where all of these issues are becoming important. But that doesn't mean we're neglecting the elderly. And there's actually a growing market for all kinds of requirements for senior citizens as well. Now, just to give you a relative size of Africa, our office actually covers a region that is just over 4 times the size, or just under 4 times the size of the continental USA. So we cover a vast region of many different countries and many different economies. And you, as Americans who can speak English as your first language, you have a benefit, because where you see the red on the map, that is where English is the national language of a country. It may not be the first language that people speak, but it is a language that they grow up with, and it's typically the language that they're entertained in. Africa is very tied in with the kinds of American cultural icons that we see, because we're very we do speak the same language often. And if you look at where the population is densest in the far right map, you'll see that that coincides with where English is spoken. So in Africa, approximately 60% of language can be of business can be conducted in English, which makes it very convenient for American companies. And then what is really happening with the young middle class? And this is a key thing, because young middle class people are the market. This is where the market is growing. This is where we're seeing big demands. So they are very focused on creating a comfortable lifestyle. They're very focused on, but they're critically focused on family and faith community. And that means that they're very tied in with family tradition. They're very strongly tied to family tradition. And so keep in mind that where you can get a comprehensive family style care for young families, that's going to be really the jackpot for Africa. The other thing is that Africans work very hard. The young generation is characterized in sociological studies as being the most entrepreneurial generation around the world. And so there's a lot of opportunities that can be tied in with that. But keep in mind that the value system is very different from what we see from their grandparents and even their parents' generations. These young people are strongly anti-corruption. They're turning governments inside out right now. And even in South Africa right now, we're seeing big changes in the corruption. And we've seen it in Angola, we've seen it in Tanzania. There's a lot of change, very positive, going on across Africa. Now, this makes it easier for you as an American company to enter the market. So here's just a quick, another quick graph showing the demographics, how sub-Saharan Africa is now surpassing other areas in population growth and areas where population is actually declining. But population by itself doesn't tell you much of the story, because if population is not getting wealthier, then it becomes a political hazard. But we are seeing that there's a big growth in GDP per capita. So this is where Africa becomes incredibly important, because it is a market where people are becoming wealthier and they can afford top quality medical care. The next thing is, very quickly, the African Continental Free Trade Area was promulgated in May of 2020, and it has been commenced and enacted in January 2021. So we're actually going to be seeing likely a consolidation of the regulatory environment, very similar to what happened in Europe. This is a common market, first of all, for internal trade, but it's going to be, they're going to be working on regulatory and creating a common regulatory environment for phytosanitary requirements first. And then likely in the future, they're going to be going for regulatory environment requirements for all kinds of different areas and perhaps even a common currency. Let's see. But this is something that if you're getting into the African market, understanding the regulatory environment will become easier and easier because it will not be a series of a lot of different countries or regional trade blocs. It's going to be one effective common market. And then you can see very quickly which countries are going to be benefiting the most from this common market: South Africa, Kenya, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and Morocco. Those are the ones that have the, so if you're coming in as a company maybe and you want regional distribution for your medical equipment or devices, these are the countries that you probably should focus on. It will depend on what you're looking for and what kind of market you are looking at. These also are regionally some of the most developed in the region and have the best connectivity. So very quickly, the healthcare market in sub-Saharan Africa is again increasing. I don't want this to be a discussion about statistics. The market in Africa is it is growing already very, very quickly. It's growing at about double the rate of growth. So most of the African continent is growing at about 8 to 9% in the medical economy, which is approximately double of what's happening. And post-COVID, everything has taken off again, and we're seeing big increases in demand, often because of the pent-up demand. But we do see that there are divergences in the total market, and we can see that South Africa, for example, right now is growing very quickly in terms of the size of the medical market. Now, South Africa's expenditure right now is half private and half public, and that makes it easier for a lot of companies that want to come in very quickly. The next thing is the medical device market. It's $3.2 billion. Now, interestingly enough, there was a lot of attention paid to the regulatory requirements for medical devices in Brazil, for example. But in South Africa, all you need to do is to send your medical device to a company that's registered as an importer of medical devices, and they also have to be registered as a distributor of medical devices. That medical device has to be registered, but it doesn't have to pass any very strict criteria that, for example, like the European requirement or the Brazilian requirement, or even like the US FDA. We often look at these things in terms of what is market related, and there is a plan eventually to get medical devices highly regulated. But right now, Africa, and South Africa particularly, has a relatively, I'm not going to say lenient, but they've got a very different type of regime that allows companies to import into the country relatively easily. You don't have to wait several years to get your product into the market. If anybody is interested and you want to work through our office, you'll get a lot of information relating to all kinds of different issues, and as well, the Brazil office will offer this service. We can provide market research and assist you with regulatory backgrounding, what the kinds of things that you would need coming into the market. These are all very important, and we would help you as we're helping you to find new markets and understanding what the markets have to offer. And there's just a few more statistics about what's going on with the medical devices and consumable market here in South Africa. And then very quickly, we do have a very different country than the United States. And so we've got to bear in mind that there are different strengths and weaknesses here. The South African government would really enjoy having a national healthcare system that gives a really good universal healthcare, but unfortunately, the budget is not able to cover that right now, and COVID has probably put it back a couple of years. So let's look at that and understand that South Africa does have emerging market issues, but it does provide opportunities for companies coming in as well. Just quickly, looking at the pharmaceutical market, yes, it's about 25 billion presently across Africa. and you can see a bit of a breakdown as the changes happened. eHealth has been making big inroads, and we've been working with companies regularly in all kinds of different eHealth applications. So we're seeing big investments coming in, a lot of interest, a lot of creativity, and particularly a lot of homegrown opportunities that are being filled with local solutions. And these local solutions are starting to create product that actually may have global applications. And what is really interesting is, with a population of 1 billion young people who have the internet at their fingertips, why shouldn't they make these opportunities global? And so Africa's got a lot of creativity driving the healthcare market, and it's being driven by young people who are serving young people, and all of them want they love the speed and the attention of the market. The one thing they lack is capital, so this is an issue. But eHealth is one big area that across Africa there's a lot of opportunity. Now, the IT industry across Africa is worth about $40 billion, and approximately just over 10 or 15% of that relates to healthcare. And we have assisted companies in hospital management, in all kinds of different areas that relate to the value of information technology in the healthcare sector. So another thing that's really important is healthcare architecture. And you can see by the size of the faint green circles on the edge there that there's a big need in some of the very big low-income countries, such as Nigeria. And the need is recognized. There's a lot of opportunity that comes through development funding, but there's also good local funding, and understanding where private sector is involved in a lot of this can help you understand. So following the money is important, but we've actually done a lot of work in healthcare development in terms of assisting companies that come in with a full package to set up a hospital, for example, or we've done full trade missions with hospital architecture. There's a lot of opportunities right across the board. And for example, we're dealing with a paint company that does electrostatic paint that kills bacteria, mildew, and anything like that in contact. So you know that hospitals are some of the worst places to catch a disease as well. So having a safe environment is really important, and ensuring that everything works. These are where there's a lot of opportunity. And again, Africa generally didn't seem very well prepared for COVID. South Africa itself, with 3,300 ICU beds, did make it through the worst of the crisis without issue. But there is a big requirement in other countries right now, for example. So again, there's a focus on that. Here are some statistics relating to hospital bed numbers in South Africa, and you can see that there's quite a number of hospital beds in the private sector, 34,000, in the public sector, 48. But in the private sector, there's a lot more relative spend. So the private sector has about half of the total spending in South Africa. Now, you're going to find that in some countries, even though they have universal health care, that private clinics are still going to be very important, for example, in Nigeria. And it's simply because of the demand and the inability of the public health to cover that. Healthcare training, critically important. This is actually an area that our company is involved in quite regularly. My wife runs a healthcare education company that focuses on respiratory health and training the top professionals, the pulmonologists and pediatric staff and trainers of trainers and that kind of thing. So where companies can really come in is with a very good technical sounding, technical and sound advancement, where you can come in and help with training. So nursing is critically important. Doctors are in relative shortage. You can see where the national average is. There's only a few countries in Africa that can match it. So there are big, and also with follow-up, I can tell you that even the most sophisticated market, South Africa is a good market for training, and yet a lot of it is in the big demand can be in some of the lesser developed countries where there is a big middle class. Again, there's a lot of opportunity to come and visit. I would say that trade shows are very important, but the key thing is meeting the key buyers. And that's what we do. That's what our offices around the world do. And we have an opportunity for making meetings with the best qualified companies in the world for you as a New York exporter. And so whether you come as part of a trade mission, as part of an exhibition, or whether you come on your own, that's important to understand. So thanks for your time. I know that we've gone over a bit, and appreciate every moment that you've given me.
Thank you, Richard, for a great presentation. Well, there you had it. You've heard for these tremendous opportunities for healthcare and medical devices in Africa. You've heard about it in the south of the border, as we say, Brazil. We thank tremendously the effort and the presence that we are able to bring to you to access those markets through the offices of that Claudia runs, along with Vania and Richard in South Africa. Just as was promised, you heard how enticing these markets are. And we, as we've concluded now the formal presentation, we want to hear from you. Please feel free to enter your questions in the chat box, and we'll be happy to respond. In the event we don't get to your question, or you wanted to reach us after the webinar, as mentioned, you can reach us at the 212-803-2300 number, or through our website to access the applications online. So as we wait to see if there are any other questions coming in, one point of clarification, I see my colleague Catherine Bamberger, this is a team effort, had already clarified a question regarding one of the grant programs, the Global Grant Program, whereby, yes, indeed, the program is currently on hiatus, on hold in terms of its funding, which we anticipate to be restored in the next few weeks, and that program will be fully available to you. The question was asked, I think, by Patricia, and thank you for that question and for having us clarify that for all participants. Again, I encourage you to get to ask any questions that you like.
Lennox answering a question on approved medical devices to attend a trade show in Brazil.
Yes, please.
Yes, Anvisa gives a temporary admission for trade shows. So there is a need, and it's faster, and again, it's temporary, and we can help you get the companies to get that.
Thank you, Claudia.
No problem.
Next question. Do you need an approved medical device to attend a trade show in Brazil and bring the product in as a demo? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is what I've just mentioned, that it is needed an approval. It's and Anvisa provides temporary admission for products that are being exhibited on trade shows.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Patricia, for the comment there. We appreciate that indeed. As we await any other questions, we strongly urge you to take advantage. Go ahead. Is it?
No, I see there is another question in regards to
Good,
EHR in the
yes.
hospitals. And yes, this is highly, there is a high demand in Brazil because we are computerizing all the hospitals, private and public, you know, in order to, under the Connect SUS program. So there is a need for that. Not sure, you know, the potential specific for a specific company, we would need to analyze further because of course there are companies already selling here, but there is a need for that.
Yeah, South Africa or Africa as a whole, there's a lot of greenfield development and a big requirement. The problem that we often come to with many African countries is ability to pay. So that is really the key thing. But in total, it's something that is recognized, and it's an area that we have done work in assisting companies to enter the African market with. So thanks for the question.
In regards to the dietary supplements, here in Brazil, there are many companies already established, multinationals already established here that provide, depending on the type of supplements, right? If it is for internal, for how do you say that, IV, it would be covered. But for other types of supplements, there is a big market for that, like for vitamins and minerals or any other supplements for the health being. It's huge, actually. There is a big market for that. I guess
How do you protect?
yeah.
How do you protect yourself as an exporter? I think that's a good question globally. And I think that working your terms is critically important before you go into a deal, and you've got to understand your strategy. You've got to understand the market. There are some countries like Angola where even if the company may have money in their US dollar bank account, they may not get authorization from the Angolan Reserve Bank to pay you for a month or two. And so you've got to understand that that's part of the requirement. I think that the one thing, Harold, that we help with is filtering out a lot of the nonsense. We want you to meet with good potential business partners. It doesn't guarantee that everybody is perfect, but the reason that we're here is so that people don't end up in trouble with potential or actual business partners that have done a bad thing to them financially. And so, you know, we want you to meet companies that have a good track record, that have been in the market for a long time, understand the channels of distribution, understand their market, understand pay requirements, are conscientious, are good, of good character. We want to help good people do good business with good people.
And Richard, complementing, I don't know if in Africa is the same, but in Brazil, actually, payment terms can be a competitive factor, to be honest,
Yeah.
because here we are used to pay in installments for anything, but especially when doing business, a letter of credit in Brazil is very expensive. So if you give a better payment term to a company, you know, they might even pay you more for that. You know, so it is a competitive factor in Brazil. And of course there is insurance, right? The insurance sometimes is just 1%. So you can even protect the negotiation through this insurance. But keep in mind that money is expensive in Brazil, and a capital letter is, so there is this possibility of providing, you know, 30, 60, 90-day terms for payment, and you can insure that.
For consignments of larger value, it's possible to have your purchaser get a guarantee, and then you would receive the entire payment, and then they would need to pay that back to the US Import-Export Bank. And so with developing countries, there are certain abilities that American companies do have to approach facilities like that. And so typically that kind of thing is interesting once it gets to around $250,000 for a consignment, maybe more. Smaller consignments and with risky potential buyers, you may require cash in advance. And that could be very important. If they don't want to pay for a letter of credit, and even a letter of credit, you've got to be very wary of fraud. You've got to be aware that a letter of credit can appear, the money can appear in your bank account, and then it can be rescinded because there was something wrong on the other side. And that also is something that you do have to be careful about. So understanding a market, understanding your suitability for the market, that's the first step. And then when you get down to it, we do help you find the right partner. When we get right down to it, we want to help you with a background check on that company. We won't do a full legal due diligence because we're not lawyers, but we'll do a background check and maybe call around, see what their reputation is. Do they have a good standing in their community? Are they a member of good associations? Have they been a member for a long time? Those kinds of things. Those kinds of things are important, and they can tell a good story.
There is another question, Richard, in regards to pharmaceutical products approval in Africa.
Oh, I see that. Yes. Pharmaceutical requirements are unlike medical devices. You do have to have regulatory environment, and it can take a long time. It's not, for South Africa, it's not that expensive, but it can take a long time. And there was a question also on dietary supplements. So where we have para-health items, and anything that would indicate an efficacy. If you indicate an efficacy in your advertising or on the package, it does have to go through a regimen of tests, or it's got to be proven that it will do that. So that affects a lot of alternative health products. So if you're saying that your multivitamin nutrition drink will cure you of something or other, you better have the lab say that with peer-reviewed requirements and everything that's required with a very strict regime. So the pharmaceutical environment, you'll be surprised, across Africa, can even be a little bit more regimented than it may be in the United States. And so this is what coming together as one common market will really mean for Africa, that we'll be able to benefit from having one bigger regulatory environment where if you've passed one, you'll pass all. And so we're really looking forward to that, but that could still be a good 15 years away.
Thank you again for the question, Harold. Appreciate it. Any other questions? Keep them coming. Again, a reminder to all participating that today's webinar is being recorded and will be posted on the Global New York website for your access after the session via an internet link. So keep that in mind. Also, again, thank you, Cephas, for the comment. Richard, complimenting you and Claudia for the great presentation and responses. So a quick reminder again, we urge you strongly to take advantage of these resources to help your businesses grow internationally by going on to the Global New York website and filling out the online application for the EMASH program, Export Marketing Assistance Program, the STEP program, and as it comes on stream, so too for the Global New York Grant Program. And again, don't hesitate to call us at the 212-803-2300. And I see there's one of the questions just came in, so we're doing it real time as we present these. And the question is asked, can you issue a free sale certificate? Certificates of free sale sometimes are offered through partners we have currently in economic development, and we can perhaps work with you to get to the point where we can get you one of those. In the past, we have issued some of those to our clients, and it's something we would consider again going forward. But however, we should be able to direct you to where you can currently get one of those certificates issued to your company. And the question was asked again about the presentation. It will be available online following the session as they're recorded and posted. So I think we're coming to a conclusion. We thank everyone for participating. Again, thank you, Richard and Claudia, and special thanks to Vanya, Cherry, and of course, Maggie Cunningham for keeping us technically sound during this process. And of course, as you see, our colleagues from around the regions, Global New York team, Catherine, Antonio, Brian, and Carrie Baker Scott. We're all available here to work with you, a phone call away as indicated. So we look forward to hearing from you and working with you going forward. Again, thanks all and have a good day.